When should or shouldn't you change a professional advisor?
I think the relationship that anyone has with their professional advisor, be it law, accounting, financial planning, insurance, whatever, I think it's a very special relationship. It's a very important relationship, and it's not to be taken for granted. Recently I've just seen a file where there's been a gap, there's been a vacuum in the advice someone has been getting, and the result isn't good. So I think it's very important to have an active dialogue with your advisors, and they'll have different cycles. You don't need to update your will every month, but your lawyer will, based on your circumstances, tell you an ideal kind of cycle to revisit your will, or what should happen for you to revisit a will. I think people should talk to their accountant much more than once a year. Absolutely. I have clients I talk to weekly, sometimes more frequently, sometimes multiple times a week, sometimes once a month. There's certain clients we like to talk to, say, within 10 days of month end. And this is the interesting thing. It's not because there's some magic that's happened in the numbers. We get that sometimes it's just good for the client to have someone to talk to about this stuff, because sometimes focus and accountability can have a good effect. And anyway, I think that's the case with all sorts of advice relationships. I think, sadly, there are times when an advice relationship isn't working, and that could be for a couple of reasons. It could be because the communication has broken down, and that's not good, or it's because the technical quality isn't up to scratch, or it might be an issue outside the advisor's scope. Well, that's okay. That advisor should refer that onto someone who has the skill to deal with that. But I think, and sometimes you get some strange anomalies there. Sometimes the technical will be not good, but the relationship will be good. And that's kind of an odd place, because the client will stay with that advisor out of some kind of loyalty. Whereas I don't see a balance. I don't see a balance in that loyalty. I don't see. I just don't see that working.
And in terms of the advisor always planning ahead, always being one step ahead, the next step is this. What do you have to say on that?
Absolutely. I think that's a really important part of a relationship with an advisor. I think the advisor has to always have in mind the next step for the client.
And what kind of plans do you do generally? Does it depend, sometimes there might be 10-year plans, or there might be really short term, do you want to touch
You know me, I just wing stuff. There's no planning. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. For some clients we do have 10-year plans.
Yeah.
And I guess it depends on the client's circumstances and the stage the clients are at in their business or in their life. I've had scenarios that I've been working on for, I think, 20 years, and they've come to fruition. But they were, the foundation for those plans was set up 20 years ago.
And does the client always fully understand or know all the planning that goes into it? Do they just have that, they buy into your philosophy, like you said, and they just trust that, you're working towards a better goal in the long term?
I think ultimately it's the philosophy thing.
Yeah.
I don't think the client should have to know every detail. I think the advisor should be prepared to be transparent at any point in the advice process. But I don't think the client should have to know what the right thing is. If you're undergoing surgery and you're anaesthetised, you're pretty pleased I could pronounce anaesthetised then too, by the way. The patient shouldn't have to supervise the surgeon. I think there should be. I think there should be. I think that supervision should come from elsewhere, hopefully from professional associations and regulation and accreditation and those sorts of things. I think that's where the supervision should come from, and the client should be entitled to the right advice and independent and professional advice. Here's the interesting thing: almost anyone can call themselves an accountant.
How so?
They just do, and that's not always good. It's not always good. I'm a chartered accountant and a CPA. I chose to be a chartered accountant because at the time I did the study, it was the hardest course of study, and I knew that if I didn't do the hardest thing, I wouldn't forgive myself later. So I went through the rigour of the PY as it was then, and I'm pleased I did. I think, at the risk of getting into trouble here, I think chartered accountants generally, this is my view, this is generalisation, but I think chartered accountants generally are pretty good technically, so they have the technical depth. And I think CPAs can be slightly broader, but not always as technical, and I think that's just a trade-off and a slight difference that I perceive. I don't know if that's true or representative, but that's how I perceive it.
Is it common for accountants to have both qualifications, CA and CPA? Or you're an anomaly?
An anomaly?
Anomaly, thank you.
Say anaesthetist. I don't know what proportion of accounts would have multiple qualifications. I think there's a few. I have some other accreditations as well. So I'd say it would be reasonably common for an accountant to, I don't know, maybe have a tax agent accreditation, some professional association accreditation, CA, CPA, IPA, one of those. So it'd be common to have maybe 2 or 3, less common to have 4 or 5.
And do they all require lengthy periods of study?
They all have different requirements.
Okay.
I think it's important that clients appreciate the difference between some of these qualifications. I think it's important that they choose a qualification that's got some extra study behind it. Both CA and CPA require extra study for admission. I think that's an important thing, and I think that clients should be aware of that and select an advisor in part based on that and in part based on a recommendation. Find someone who's doing well, find out who they use as an accountant or as a lawyer or as a financial planner, and take that recommendation.